All right, we are loaded in. We've got MaNa as our Infernal player in blue in the bottom left, up against Numudan, our red Vanguard player in the top right. So a little more Vanguard versus Infernals. I mean, it's definitely had enough variety to some of the builds that we've seen. We've seen some of the drop play come into it and be a factor. We've seen some of the Hornet play. We've seen some of the early attacks. So at least so far, Winter, it feels like there is some degree of build variety, but certain things have definitely been staples, like that dog build opening, right? Going for the very quick upgrade for the damage on the scout, and then cycling that back into macro once you get the map control, etc.
Yeah, I think my experience, the latter experience is different than what we're seeing in the tournament, which is not that surprising, but where there's just a sort of best of one meta on the ladder. You know all about that, of course.
Yes.
The StarCraft 2 ladder is notorious for the best of one meta. But now with these players, who many of them have already played each other probably several times, so we're seeing probably some little mind games in there, as well as trying to throw other strategies or transitions in, especially things like Hornets or heavy tech for the Vanguard, or just hitting an awkward timing with a Doombringer or Magmadons for the Infernals. But I think MaNa's just going to try to play a nice, safe, solid game. I think it's on Numudan, who still highly ranked, but MaNa is, of the open qualifiers, probably one of the players to beat. So definitely needs to be on his game.
Yeah, MaNa was I remember there was like there were a couple of like alpha stage tournaments throughout the course of the last year with Stormgate. I know they ended up posting some articles about them. So the fun fact I'll share is that while I was on the winning team for the pre-alpha tournament, I was like the Krillin of the team. I was there as fodder. I did get absolutely obliterated by MaNa. So he's been good at this. He's been good at this and practicing and being up to date on everything since the very earliest stages of anybody basically being able to play this game. So I think my expectations are going to line up with yours. That I'm sure he's got something that's either going to blow our minds or he's just going to execute one of these earlier strats at a high level. But so far, just trying to take that base and got some dogs nibbling on it.
Yeah, and at least the bonus doesn't help him chomp through sheer buildings there. The Howl will keep him... there's nothing that's going to catch them. But he does need to be careful not to get infested and taken out. MaNa waiting till he has more than enough units to make sure to protect those gaunts. And Numudan, yeah, he's not going to bother trying to kite around. He doesn't want to risk it because that's the sort of situation that can snowball very quickly. Does the shrine heal over time? I don't actually know if... I imagine it's Shroud, but I'm not sure if Infernal Buildings heal over time. Obviously, you can repair Vanguard ones, but... well, we'll see eventually.
If it has to be damaged, forever, I feel like this is one of those things when we talk about like what we expect to have eventually added to the game. I feel like there's not a crazy amount of caster type units, but there's got to be some blood ritual unit that's going to be added eventually, where you'll be able to throw some level of heal around, maybe like sacrifice a nearby unit and it just blows up and heals everything near it. I don't know how demons would heal themselves, or infernals, excuse me, not trying to label them here.
the infernal host, of course.
Infernal host, excuse me. How could I possibly? I'm so sorry.
But the Magmadons and the Weaver both have the consume ability, where they can eat a Fell Hog or a Fiend and restore their white health or Shroud Shield kind of mechanic. They can do that off of Shroud, which is the key point. But it is a bit clunky to use, as those are not the smallest units, and they're trying to pick out a Fiend in the fight. But they do have that ability. But the actual normal health, I think, is just... It looks like the shrine is healing very slowly over time, but that might be a placebo effect. And if it doesn't heal very much, then obviously it's going to be a lot more vulnerable later on to even any sort of drop, or even Hornets, potentially.
Yeah, everybody seems to have different priorities for the early game, whether it's the camps, work, or harass. But what we see out of Numudan in this game, he does go for his expand. He's got his buzzsaw turret set up, so it's not like he wanted to commit to necessarily an all-in play. But he did the dog opening, and the way that he chose to use it was, I'm just going to set up perhaps a really easy snipe on this base later on down the line, or force you to make a mistake, or maybe cancel it out of fear that I'm sending more dogs or whatever. But gets Until that damage is realized, of course, it's not the biggest deal, but it's something that MaNa is going to have to be cautious about if he steps out of his base for more than a few moments.
I think this is the most even, like, early mid-game here we've seen so far, as both players have kind of jockeyed for map control. MaNa sat back, defensive, got his creep camps once he had a critical mass that could protect his gaunts, and now he's got a Doombringer in order to start to put some pressure on the Vanguard. But at the same time, Numudan is going for the straight-up bio build. He's got 4 barracks back at home, and the dogs are working their way through, chewing up a gaunt, and just backing off. They're tanky enough with that veterancy.
And there's the Doombringer going around the northwest side. So dogs are out on the map, getting some vision, being around, but perhaps there's an opportunity now for a little bit of work from MaNa as he approaches the Ethereum mining position. Habitat gets set up, so not much in the way of the defense. Trying to get some snowball here. There's the immediate overcharge, by the way. Exo's there to defend. One of the Gaunts does not make it back in. And that is about as clean of a defense as you are going to see there out of Numudan, not taking any heat from that at all.
Yeah, very good start there, understanding the threat without overcommitting. No sentry post, just pound for pound, a few Exos and a Lancer should be enough, especially if needed, you can pull the Bobs. But the Doombringer is pretty tanky, but it's hard to drop out, and then if you need to, pick up and get out while the Exos are firing at you. So going to be forced to back off, and then just roaming packs of dogs out on the field. And there's nothing protecting these imps at the third. Just keeping control of the map. Numudan doing a great job keeping MaNa on his little infernal toes.
Yeah, and then again, he's trying to throw up a few structures, take the imps away as the targets, but of course it's just more to juggle, more to manage. Does still have the Doombringer waiting outside for the opportunity to make a move, but since it is just the dogs and he can see that it's just been the dogs, there's no guarantee of safety if he moves in there. The Exos have been left behind, not a lot of, and this is perhaps an interesting question, especially as it eventually had a huge impact on games like StarCraft, but the usage of the select all army key and the non-usage of that, where it can be so helpful. But leaving your units spread out, not making yourself super open to one point being very vulnerable, and this just looks like Numudan is just trying to play like what I feel like some futuristic sense of, oh, this is what a macro opening is going to look like. I'm going to get out a couple of Exos to shut down the early harassment drops. I'm going to get the dogs for the map control, but it's clear that he doesn't have some sort of huge play that's going to take place before he gets these bases established. And Doombringer does come back in right as those Exos step out, so he's not going to wait for the reinforcements to come defend, but he did leave 2 behind on the third, so it's possible that Doombringer gets a little close. We'll just have to see. He's got space to chill though, so it's not like he has to come out. He's gonna see those Exos and say, nope, I'm good, happy right here.
Yeah, 3 bases established here for Numudan. He's got. This is a good enough economy to get a bio ball rolling. If you can get 4 or 5 barracks up and running, that's really all you need to be competitive. Ideally, you keep control of the map, but in my experience, it's okay if the Infernals go up to 4 bases. The priority is making sure you have enough medtechs and enough Exos to be able to take a fight against Magmadons. If you get caught without either of those things, you're not going to be able to really control the battle against the Magmadons. And I think now he's feeling more comfortable. And even though building a sentry post might to some seem like, oh, he's scared of drops. No, that's he wants to make sure he has something at the back so he can focus on moving out and probably taking a 4th and seeing what pressure he can put on MaNa, at least outside of his base. Ooh, MaNa actually focused on economy, injected or used the resurgence ability to saturate that base as quick as possible. So now MaNa's going to be going into mass production mode. And Numudan, same place as well.
Yeah, even though MaNa has been the player that opened up with that big, the big drop type play, and that's always going to be a threat there. You do have an option to kind of shut that down a little more for Vanguard, especially when you have a lot of Exos. You can put them inside of the turret, and then it turns into a turret that does a lot of damage. Very, very good long range zoning tool. So something that can really, as you said, give you the freedom to move out on the map, right? If that Doombringer chills there and he never makes anything, then the moment that he leaves, it's going to be a bunch of fiends in his base spilling all over.
I am a little interested. There are no med techs yet out of Numudan here. He's just going for the Lancer Exo and the dogs, well, scouting everything, which is perfectly fine as long as you don't start taking damage. Unfortunately,
just don't get
plan
hit.
survives contact with the enemy. And good SimCity there is going to box out the Magmadons and funnel the Fiends. So that way the Fiends can get taken out and then you can focus the Magmadons. But oh my god, it's happening!
Oh.
He's got the Flame Imps and he's going straight for the Exo.
So the imps, man, that's the flame on, can ignite themselves and run in just as a bomb, basically. He kind of tries to drop the totem there for a little bit more of the shroud, a bit of the pickup, but good spread by Numudan. And we were talking about not having those med techs. Well, the consequence of that is that he also just has a lot more of other stuff. So Lancers are going to try to get up on top of the Magmadons. Exo's he's not choosing to chase. Big counter in the northwest, though, as MaNa attacking the third.
Yeah, this is exactly what you need to do. This is what MaNa has talked about. Like, you have to take multiple fights. You can't win it. Even with the Flame Imps there, it wasn't a decisive victory for the Infernals. You have to whittle them down from all sides, and he just bashes through the base to the north side. He did enough damage to the army that right now Numudan doesn't have enough to move out and defend. So now he's back to 3 bases, and MaNa has 4, going on 5, I think going on 6, including the Therium kind of double patch there. No, that's actually his army on the low ground. He hasn't taken the Therium yet. But yeah, you see, definitely not using that select all army key, but instead focused on kind of just throwing units out both sides until he finds a fight he can win.
2 large forces that this skirmishy type bio army is not necessarily going to be able to stand and deliver against. So for Numudan, it starts to become a how fast can you split? How fast can you micro and stutter step these units back if you get hit on both fronts at the same time? Because we're seeing the attempt at the engage on the northwest, but that southeast side, it's coming, going up the ramp. We got 3 buzzsaw turrets trying to hold this off while the stompy stomps begin to break through.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he has a rampart habitat at the back there. And the Magmadons are able to smack their way through. The trample and the auto attack doing plenty of damage. Still no medtechs on the field, but the trees themselves helping to funnel. But a couple flame imps come in, and I think we just saw a chunk of the army get taken out. You see the blood left over. But you do need to land 2 or 3 flame imps to be able to take out those Exos, and even more for the Lancers. Stomping through on both sides.
Stomping through the trees, chasing them down. See, the only thing that opened up that choke point, I think, was the explosions off of the Hellborn. So that opens it a teeny bit, but I feel like we're really seeing the consequence of, again, it's just that it's 2 armies that you need to do a lot of micromanagement on for them to be good, and being hit on 2 flanks at the same time there just became a little bit much. MaNa using the split Magmadons as well, just making sure he always has the opportunity for a little bit of that stun, for a little bit of that tree flank potential. And something we haven't seen in a long time, Winter, is Numudan on the other side of the map. So even though he is still alive, even though he's been hanging in there, the odds of him being able to leave now without one of those exposed sides, exposed ends being attacked is very low.
Yeah, usually you see the Vanguard late game being the medtechs keeping these upgraded, these well-experienced Exos intact. With no medtechs, eventually they'll get whittled down by the splash damage. I like what MaNa's done. He's just started adding in imps. Well, he's adding Shroud Stones out in the field, and he's adding in imps on either side, very much like Banelings, in order to help break up the bio bone. It looks like he's going to do a run-by with the imps into the third base. He just flames through. How are the Bobs going to do? They'll survive for now, as one of the imps didn't actually light up. He might not have had enough Therium for it. But Dragon has arrived, and Numudan has held strong, but not strong enough. And I don't think he has what it takes. The medtechs are a bit late, and not nearly enough of them. Well, we'll see, but I'm not optimistic.
We'll see how MaNa looks like he's not ready to take the engagement yet. He had a couple units waiting on the high ground there. They're going to get grabbed, but it seems he doesn't want to risk throwing this, especially, Dragon's not necessarily easy to get, pretty expensive resource-wise as well. So trying to just set up that position, and the imps, like you mentioned, a couple flame-ons, that'll do it.
Yeah, the Magmadon on the side, he found he's stopping, and body blocking him in. Here come the Magmadons from both sides.
Nowhere to go. Just completely cuts off the escape route. There's the effigy right on top, and Numudan taps out. MaNa The patience, the patience. I thought his army looked pretty good in the Northwest Winter. It seemed like he had a lot. It seemed like the fight was going to take place, but he's like, no. I want him to go to feel like he has to move around, and then I want to cut him off, set up a trap, and that's exactly what he did. Very cool usage of that. Not just the damage that the Magmadon does, but the fact that when it's doing that stomp, it's pushing units away. It's creating space or denying space, I guess, in this situation.
There is a literal wall of Magmadon keeps you from escaping. I think MaNa, now that was probably a bit overkill at that scenario, but it's good to get in the habit of, because the times we've seen Vanguard come back against Infernals is when the Infernals are just like, I have twice as many bases, I can throw however many units at them, it'll be fine. And then suddenly the veterancy starts adding up and you don't quite have enough units and you're coming in from one angle, and those exos start to get real difficult to deal with as you don't have the more expensive later game units. So MaNa making sure that the moment that Numudan decided, well, I have to go do something, was his last moment, and a pretty decisive victory. Though a great game. I liked what Numudan was doing.
I like the
Just
build.
not able to keep up.
It felt like he had a good game plan. Just MaNa, like, as you said, it doesn't survive first contact with the enemy, of course. MaNa is not just someone that's been playing this beta that's really good at it, but he's someone that's been a premier tournament winning RTS pro player for, with a very long storied career. So seeing him come up and do well, I did see some love for Numudan in the chat. I think maybe just a player from outside of our scene that I'm not as familiar with, but I loved his approach to it. Take map control early on, still does an economic build, and as we continue to move forward with this series, maybe we'll see other types of strategies that he has, or if we see him try to kind of just iron that out a little bit further from last time.
I'm interested. It seems like a very active choice because there's no reason he couldn't get the med techs early. They're a little expensive, but you're not really spending Therium on much else at that stage of the game once you get the upgrades. So in taking that long, I think it ended up allowing MaNa to break through. But we'll see in game 2.
All right, we are here. We are ready to rock and roll. In the bottom left, we had Numudan, our blue Vanguard. In the top right, we have MaNa, the red Infernal player. And this is that map we were talking about with the rocks that you can break open to access the Therium, and the choice of whether you take that early or take it later, and how exactly you handle that situation. But Numudan did the dog build, went up to a fairly quick, we could say 3-base-ish play, mostly bio, and didn't really leave his base too much because we had that fast Doombringer out of MaNa. So MaNa was able to keep him at home, allow him to expand his economy very aggressively. How is Numudan going to strike back? What adjustments is he going to make? Will we see something committed a little earlier if he expects that there will be a fast drop?
I think the Horn Dog build. The Hornets, as a follow-up to the Dogs, especially on a larger map like this, the Hornets can trade so well with the Gaunts, and you have a lot more space to work with, which obviously benefits fast air units, especially with the return to hangar ability. I'd be honestly a little disappointed if we didn't see him. If he takes map control like that with the Dogs again, which it looks like he's going command post first, actually, but if he's able to take map control and then exploiting it with the Hornets, and then from there you can either go into the kind of Atlas composition, or just into your more standard bio with like the Exos and hopefully more than 0 medtechs.
Yeah, I feel like we really got to see the factor that played missing, especially after the previous series, right? Where we didn't just see the medtech be good, but we saw its usage in the turret also be really fantastic. It's got quite a bit of utility. Really, it's that second layer that all the biological units really have. And I think when you look at a game like Stormgate, one of the other things that really stands out to me is the idea or the concept of tech switches, because there is no +1 melee. It's not +1 armor. There aren't these 6 upgrades for each specific unit type that completely transform how they interact. There's 1 or 2 key upgrades, it seems, and almost an upgrade for every unit, which can be in some ways a little more simple, in some ways a little more complex, but there's never really that drop off that occurs when you have the unit and you keep it. So it's not like, okay, if I'm going to transition into something else, these guys will fall off because they just won't scale without the upgrades. It's you kind of take a different approach to it, so you can use a little bit of everything, and that's what makes it fun. That's what I loved seeing out of Mixu earlier too. So I want to see more of that. Honestly, it was really fun.
Yeah, the Vanguard gets that extra benefit from keeping and fighting with units, as opposed to just sitting in their base and building those basic upgrades. Which, the Infernals, on the other hand, their units are pretty much as effective as they're ever going to get once they finish any basic upgrades and they pop out of the Iron Vault or the Conclave or whatever building they're coming out of. So, ideally, when you spend on a Magmadon or on especially those later game units, you're trying to take some advantage, because otherwise you kind of just sitting back and waste a little like Zerg with things like Banelings in StarCraft 2, where you've spent on it, but you're only going to get so much value out of it in the fight, and the longer you wait, the more time that could have been spent on economy instead.
Right.
And you're kind of delaying things like, especially getting your third base is usually the hardest part as Infernals. Not on this map or in this game, but against an aggressive, like, kind of dog and hornet player like we've seen a lot of today.
Yeah, we did see in the first game, Numudan, his opener was sending the dogs to try and just knock down the expansion too. Like, in a way, it felt, he didn't try to dive the workers, but in a way, it felt like it had that same level of aggression, and that it puts the sense of urgency on the opponent that they still have to come out and do something. So if you were trying to just be economic, if you were trying to just be greedy and skip a unit or two, suddenly you have to make those units. So maybe you defend the base, but your actual build is no longer viable in the way that you were originally intending. So he has the biokinetics lab, 3 racks set up, pretty nice base layout. Exo in the main mineral line too, so he's thinking about the anything and everything that could end up happening in this game, while MaNa does that infernal thing where they you see snowballing quite a few bad boys, quite a few fiends off of those camps.
Yeah, the dog, just the single scout, doing, well, its namesake early on, keeping track of where MaNa's moving around. There's only a single turret here, but he's got a nice funnel set up, where as long as he's quick on the repair or has enough units, he should be able to deal with early aggression. This is your classic cover your expand with an attack, so to speak, from MaNa. But he's taken a third, but if he does kill the Buzzsaw turret, well, then it's certainly going to get a lot easier to keep that expansion alive through the aggressive defense.
Oh, and then immediately the Lancers surrounded, no opportunity to escape. The Fiends are on top, and does still have, of course, the build speed improvement from having the overcharge still running, so it's not like he's completely without a paddle. Could also put the Exo in the turret for the extra long range to push back the poke. One of the really annoying things, especially on this map, when you're getting poked by Gaunts early, when they bounce, the attacks bounce off of the buildings onto your workers trying to repair or build on the other side. So you need to keeping at least one of those sentry posts up is just of paramount importance.
Yeah, even then, though, if he had gotten 1, maybe 2 more Buzzsaws, he would have just ripped through those Gaunts. So definitely could have been a costly fight for MaNa, but just a little late. I think he's going to salvage the sentry post in the resource line there. That was more of a, wait a second, is this a real attack? Like,
yeah,
but
you don't want it to be. You'd prefer to have it in the front for sure. The Buzzsaw, like, that's the trade-off, I guess. The Buzzsaw has like the lowest range. The regular one is kind of a medium range. That the Exo one definitely feels like the longest, but that's also because it has that punch and it's got a much bigger turret and sound effect. And obviously the sound effects, Winter, they're usually very indicative of the strength of things, as we know.
Besides the Hornet in this case.
Besides the Hornet, which is silent but deadly. Another one as well.
Yeah, the Lancers, he's getting through the vision camp here. I believe, I'm not sure if he has the quick draw hustle, the movement speed after shooting on those Exos yet. But MaNa doesn't have that many units on the field. He's just chilling in the healing camp over there. Ooh, 7 on Therium, which clearly indicates an interest in getting more tech up here for Numudan, who doesn't yet have that 3rd command post. I think he was significantly delayed by MaNa's attack, which did a little more than I think he bargained for, even with it.
Yeah, and he's taken just additional bases too, right? Moving immediately towards the other rock path that you can open up for Therium on the right side. So he's just like, yeah, I'm not gonna force the fight this game. You can see where the respect maybe for Numudan is coming through, that he's like, this is not a guy that I'm just going to catch him with a simple mistake. He was pretty good at dealing with the harass, so MaNa takes a more economic focus, and maybe he's just going to play for that big overwhelming play a little bit earlier than we've already seen it.
MaNa, he's still chilling at the health camp there, which is a bit of a liability. If he gets caught, he could end up losing a sizable chunk of his unit. It's not a game-ending thing if he gets caught out here, but he certainly doesn't want to just lose these for free. And he's getting chased down. There's a med tech, so he knows they exist. And using the howl to make sure that no Magmadons are about to come crashing through the trees as well. And
yeah, that's because the dog vision, you can see through pretty much all the fog of war in a quite wide radius. On this map, it's nice because that's one of your ways to check through those trees. And I think especially you mentioned the air units, but obviously it blocks the pathing until you start breaking them all down. So I guess maybe that's one of the other fun things about it, though. When you have a map with this many trees, your strategy could partially revolve around terraforming it. Like, you know what, this chunk, we're just going to open this up. This is going to be where I want to wall off or whatever. You know, that's where that time playing the game really starts to bake in.
Yeah, this map, if it goes on long enough in this matchup, usually ends up just being an open field. As the Magmadon starts stomping through, he used a Bob to get through into this base. And if Matt doesn't have, okay, he's got Magmadons there. I'm not sure if the trample, the actual mini stun, is upgraded. Oh, but he goes the Magmadon flank a little bit off center, but still getting a lot of damage onto those Exos. Gets a med tech.
Hit. Cuts off the med tech, like you said. The other two actually getting a little bit lagged behind, trying to get the heals off. And he splintered the army so much that he's just got a bunch of these Exos spread out, and they are not that cheap. So MaNa getting a good counter response to that cheeky little break into the southeast base. And as you mentioned, we've already seen the Magmadon control from MaNa just be absolutely filthy. So he's using them. He's already using them as like that third control group that you have set aside just away from the fight, just for when they accidentally kite too close and you could cut them off, or however he's been doing it. It's just been absolutely a treat to watch. And two big army setups. So he's saying, whichever way you go out or decide to commit or attack, I'm going to try to pull you towards the middle of the field and then hit you on the other side at the same time. Effigy goes up for Shroud on this fight. Trying to pick off the first Buzzsaw turret. Looks like he's going to be able to get it. And now stomping into the natural.
So many Bobs already down. The Fiends popping out on both sides. And MaNa makes it so the overcharge is invalidated. He's attacking both sides at once. And the natural is pretty much gone. There's still one more. There's no more Bobs. He might be able to clean it up eventually. But, Nathanias, at what cost?
The question we must always ask ourselves, the cost indeed. A decent amount of the Bobs at the third were still alive, I suppose. Maybe he's just trying to get the Magmadon close enough to do one more stomp if he can near the Bobs, and looks like he'll get a little bit of work done, but that overcharge was back again, so they're not going to die. And instead the Magmadon will lay to rest in that Therium line in Numudan's main base.
At the end of the day, though, when you reset the units like that, you also reset the veterancy. You reset the ability. Well, he has to rebuild those Bobs, so he can't be building a lot of static defense, or at least he doesn't want to. And resetting the veterancy is probably the biggest part of maintaining momentum in this kind of mid to late game scenario, where both sides are still, like, they don't have the end game armies of like 10 Hellborn and 20 medtechs, but at the same time, they're very dangerous to each other depending on positioning. And I think MaNa clearly has the advantage here. Numudan's going to be very scared to move out on the map without full vision.
It's a dark and scary place. It's a very dark and scary place, Winter. His vision camp on the north side will get secured by MaNa. He's defended all of his bases. We did get to see Numudan try to go across a little bit more in this game, but it has not really played out the way he wants. We got two big drop coming out from the Doombringer. Two Magmadons comes through with the step on the Bobs. Now another one does get caught in the middle of the field here by the Exos as he continues to approach that north vision camp, but I would be scared going in deep on this push against MaNa. Numudan is going to have to get some serious work done with everything that he's lost leading up to this point. A decisive fight, it seems, is going to occur potentially right here if he's able to get on top of him by MaNa.
Pretty decisive indeed, as the Flame Imps just obliterate everything. The Magmadons clean them up, but the Imps handled the home front all on their own. and looks like MaNa improved even over the last game.
To see that though, the way that he uses the units, the way that we see the conversations about the flame on, and okay, well, it's not like you can't just make it like a baneling and keep it forever. You make the choice to turn the imp into the flames, and then it has to go and do it. You don't just get to sit there and keep it forever. So when you're making these pushes, like the big difference, you compare it to like a push that you would be doing as a Terran versus a Zerg in StarCraft, where you'd usually have your heal is your transport, so you can just pull away and get out of there. But so that's maybe there's a mechanic or a time and a place to try and bait that out of somebody. But MaNa just recognizing, okay, his whole army is right here. He has to push. He has to do something. Yeah, just throw the imps at him. What is he going to do? Just run into the rest of the army, which is, I guess, what happened.
Yeah, just getting caught out. You do have to find that Vanguard army broken up. The Death Ball, if it's just kind of like a unit trainer sort of situation where we're both in a lane fighting each other, well then yeah, the Vanguard are going to have a pretty easy time of it. But MaNa never let that happen. You got the magma drops at the back. The imps were ready. So I don't even think there's any way to tell that he has that upgrade finished until, well, you're very much aware of it.
It's too late.
So,
the surprise factor. Definitely a big component to keep in mind.
yeah, I think just as a comment on that, something you can use, and this is just like basic RTS mechanics. If you're not A moving with the imps, the bio army doesn't consider them a threat until they light up when they're right next to your army, and then suddenly. But so the units aren't actually auto attacking them unless they're focused specifically. So MaNa using that to even greater effect on top of just breaking everything up and knocking it down. That was if there was a textbook to be written at this point, that would be it, I think, so far.